Sierra, Hotel, India, Echo, Lima, Delta, Shield. By the end of 2012, those words were plastered all over WWE programming, with the Shield introduced with the idea that they'd be muscle for CM Punk. For the Punker himself, he had his own ideas for that group, but his unhappiness with the Shield was just one of many, many uphill battles the Second City Saint was facing behind the scenes back then. Elsewhere in 2012, there was a bizarre pitch for Daniel Bryan. The Undertaker was encouraging certain talents to sabotage their own gimmicks, and WWE even arrogantly made plans for talent under contract with other promotions. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 fascinating facts about WWE in 2012. Number 10. Vince McMahon nixed CM Punk in the UFC. CM Punk would have had quite the schedule over Royal Rumble 2012 weekend had he got his own way, as originally the Punker was earmarked to walk Chael Sonnen out for the American Gangsters UFC fight with Michael Bisping in Chicago on the Saturday night, as in 24 hours before the Royal Rumble in St. Louis. Despite knowing that Punk's WWE title would be on show in front of millions and millions of people, Vince McMahon stepped in to scrap those plans, labeling the UFC as barbaric, even though he allowed Triple H to accompany Floyd Mayweather to the ring for a boxing match just a few months later. Number 9. Christian was loaned to TNA for Ric Flair. To show the arrogance of Vince McMahon, WWE announced the 4 horsemen for the 2012 Hall of Fame before even ever contacting TNA to see if they'd allow Ric Flair to appear at that ceremony. Of course, WWE and TNA did eventually come to an agreement, but that meant WWE had to send one of their contracted wrestlers to TNA as a one-off, resulting in Christian, or Christian Cage to be specific, appearing at Slammiversary as a make-weight for Flair being at the Hall of Fame. The story goes, some within TNA were shocked that Dixie Carter didn't ask for a bigger star than Christian, but Dixie had fond memories of working with Christian previously, with Captain Charisma winning the NWA World title twice during his previous TNA stint. Number 8. The Undertaker told Brodus Clay to fall. If The Undertaker got his way, Brodus Clay would have had his own Shockmaster moment. As Brodus revealed during a Talk Is Jericho appearance, the dead man approached him backstage before the 9th of January 2012 Raw, where Brodus Clay was repackaged as the Funkasaurus. What was Taker's advice to the big man? Why, that was to take a deliberate fall on the stage, in turn ruining the moment and forcing WWE to scrap the character entirely. You see, The Undertaker thought the Funkasaurus was a lame gimmick, and that such a tumble would have Vince demanding his creative team to come up with something else for Brodus Clay. In the end, Brodus didn't take that advice and did his best to make the goofy gimmick work, which it did for maybe 10 minutes before everyone got bored. Well, everyone except for Vince McMahon, of course. Number 7. John Cena saved Brodus Clay's WrestleMania moment. Who'd have thought Brodus Clay will get mentioned so much, eh? Back at WrestleMania 28 for Brodus, he was intended to have a dancing segment with his mama, but the event running long meant that segment was to be cut. That is, until John Cena stepped in. Of course, WrestleMania 28 was headlined by Cena and The Rock. Once in a lifetime, of course, until it wasn't a year later. And when Cena caught wind of Brodus' segment being dropped, he walked up to the big fella and said he was going to the bathroom, stating, "What do you think? Like 8 minutes?" Brodus understood what Cena was getting at, with John essentially holding back the event so that Brodus Clay could have his WrestleMania moment. Number 6. Daniel Bryan almost wrestled Charlie Sheen. Yes, really. In 2012, WWE wanted to book Charlie Sheen in a SummerSlam match against none other than Daniel Bryan. Those plans fell apart when Charlie Sheen said the company couldn't pay him enough money to make it happen, and instead, Charlie made a cameo on Raw 1000 a month before SummerSlam. As for Bryan, he ended up working Kane at SummerSlam, which, let's face it, was probably for the best, as seeing Charlie Sheen stumble his way through the least convincing "I'm excited to watch WWE" banter with Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler via Skype on that Raw, that was very much painful enough. That Bryan vs. Sheen match would have tied into Charlie's anger management TV show, with Daniel Bryan obviously having his own on-screen anger management issues at the time, so the match kind of would have made sense, but obviously it would have been extremely, extremely awful. Number 5. Fred Durst was kicked out of SummerSlam. Speaking of SummerSlam, of course, WWE regularly likes to show off any celebrity attendees at their events, and that was intended to be the case at SummerSlam 2012, with Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst there in attendance. One could rightly argue that Durst's popularity had dropped massively by 2012, but WWE chose to show him on camera regardless, and of course Fred responded to that by throwing up a middle finger like this was 1999 and he was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Given this was very much the PG era, WWE officials immediately freaked out and had Fred Durst swiftly booted out of the arena. Durst later lambasted WWE's PG image in comparison to the wild, wild days of the Attitude Era, but in an era of corporate sponsorship and kid-friendly content, flipping the bird was a strict no-no. Number 4. 9 of 12 pay-per-views had non-title main events. A statement that feels like it absolutely cannot be true, but of WWE's 2012 pay-per-view pay-per-views, only 3 of the 12 had world title matches as their main events. That'd be CM Punk vs Cena, Punk vs Ryback at Hell in a Cell, and Punk vs Cena vs Ryback at Survivor Series. That means a whopping 9 pay-per-views had non-title headliners. You can maybe understand why Rock vs Cena at WrestleMania, or Cena vs Brock Lesnar at Extreme Rules headlined over any title matches, but Cena vs John Laurinaitis as the main event of Over the Limit? Yeah, maybe not so much. Given how this was a year that CM Punk was on fire but felt disrespected by his positioning as champion, you can kinda see why the Second City Saint was pissed off at how he was treated at times during 2012. Number 3, Ryback forced a huge change of plans. The repackaging of former Nexus man Skip Sheffield into the hungry Goldberg-esque wrecking machine known as Ryback in April 2012, that was quite the popular change. So popular, in fact, that Ryback headlined Hell in a Cell against CM Punk in that October, and Vince McMahon was so impressed that he decided to keep experimenting with the big guy. A planned Team Punk versus Team Foley elimination match at Survivor Series was altered, with Team Ziggler replacing Team Punk, and CM Punk instead defending his title against John Cena and Ryback at that event. Unfortunately, that Survivor Series drew barely 200,000 pay-per-view buys, making it the lowest drawing Survivor Series since 1996, with McMahon then started to cool a little on Ryback. Still, it's interesting that Ryback forced WWE to change direction in such a short space of time. Plus, that Survivor Series main event led to something a little bigger. Number 2, The Shield almost had literal shields. Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Roman Reigns famously debuted at Survivor Series 2012, all wearing plain black outfits and having a SWAT team vibe from the very get-go. However, WWE planned to be more literal with the whole Shield thing in the build to that pay-per-view, as creative plans had Rollins, Ambrose, and Reigns carry big riot shields that said, well, Shield on them. These plastic props would have been accompanied by some big boss man style batons and clubs as well, but thankfully, come go time, it was decided that the Shield didn't need weapons, for the Shield were the weapon. WWE has been guilty plenty of times of being way too cartoony in the past, but the Shield needed to come across as edgy and dangerous, and their stripped back presentation was 100% the right call to help get the wrestling world talking about this mysterious new trio who like to powerbomb fools through the announce desk. Number 1, CM Punk didn't want Roman Reigns. It's easy to forget that the Shield unit was originally pitched as a security detail for CM Punk, and the reigning WWE champion had a solid idea exactly who he wanted to fill all 3 spots. That'd be Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Cassius Ohno, aka Chris Hero. Sadly for Punk, top brass didn't agree with all of those picks. Triple H and Vince McMahon thought Ohno should be subbed out for Roman Reigns instead, and while Punk wasn't too keen on that idea, it would have been yet another uphill battle for him to convince Triple H and Vince that Ohno was the way to go. Genuinely, it's fascinating to think how differently the career of Chris Hero could have gone had he indeed been the third man, but sadly for Hero, that wasn't meant to be. As such, Roman Reigns became the brooding, silent man of the Shield, which played nicely off Ambrose's crazy, Roddy Piper-style madman, and Rollins' whining and electric athleticism.